Because of COVID-19, we've just seen an explosion of interest of it around the world, some very large-scale deployments, and it just makes us very happy to see our product helping teachers engage remote students in a high-quality online learning experience. Have a good Mood.
Welcome back, MoodleMoot users, to MoodleMoot 2020 online. We have Gavin and Karen from Brickfield Education Labs ready to present to us in regards to moving lecturers and educators towards more blended provisions of their courses, bearing in mind not being specialists in their web or accessibility experts. So thanks for joining us, and over to you.
Hi there. So I'm Gavin Henrick from Brickfield Education Labs. A lot of you probably know me from various MoodleMoots in the past.
I'm Karen Holland, and I'm working with Gavin in Brickfield as well.
And she's also my wife. But hey, only took 30 years. So today we're going to be talking about accessibility for teachers. And one of the key things we're going to be using is an aspect of accessibility, which is providing subtitles. So I see 6 have already joined. We're going to wait 1 or 2 minutes while people are accessing PowerPoint Live. So what this is, we're using PowerPoint to actually present our presentation, and on this screen it's actually going to be showing our slides and then a full transcript beside it in English, and then you can also choose to go into other languages. It's, you know, it's better than nothing. It's not as good as a real-time captioner, but certainly with automatic subtitles, I feel that the PowerPoint Live is a pretty good solution out there at the moment. So 14 at the moment. Let's just see, is there anyone else? And okay, so let's kick this off then. And that URL will be at the top of any of our slides as we're going through the presentation. Okay, so I'm now going to move that away. Great. So accessibility for teachers. You know, accessibility is an interesting topic. We all use accessibility features probably without thinking about them. You might use an elevator, which is originally an accessibility feature. You might use subtitles on a video while you're in a very boring meeting and watching that really cool cat or goat video, which has subtitles on it. So these are the kind of things that you might already be using. You also might be tabbing through an Excel document or a forum on a web page. And that's another accessibility feature. So you're already using these things without knowing. Accessibility, as it stands, isn't just for people with a disability. It's for everybody. It's about improving education in this context, education outcomes for everybody. So, accessibility, usability, and inclusion, 3 powerful words, and they're really intertwined in how we go about delivering teaching and learning. And it's about creating a web that works for everyone, not just for people without a disability, and not just for people with a disability. You may have read recently, and I think it's about 6 months ago now, where Tim Berners-Lee, the founder of the web, was one of the people behind this new contract for the web. And if you haven't heard about it, I really suggest you go and look at the website, read through these principles. But the fourth principle was key. It was about internet affordability and accessible to everyone, no matter what culture, race, skill, disability, and ability, and otherwise. So it's a really important principle, and it's something which we absolutely should be including in our teaching and learning. What does accessibility mean? Well, it means a lot of things to different people, but it means availability. So things are available to everybody. Inclusion, that nobody is excluded. Usability, so it's something that everybody is able to just use it easily. It's following standards. So there are internationally agreed guidelines, as they call them, on the different things that should be happening in web content. So that's Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG, for those who don't know. And then predictability. Accessibility is more than just technical. It's also about predictable. How many times do you go into a Moodle site where every course is laid out completely differently? And this is just confusing everybody sometimes. Where's your slides from week one in each of your modules? Could be named and positioned totally differently in each different course. It's also about reducing the negative impact of disabilities on access. And that's where a lot of what we're talking about now is going to come into play. So before we go any further, I just want you to take a moment and reflect. And this is a workshop, so there'll be 4 occasions in this that we get you to do something or think something. But I'd like to think about how accessibility impacts your teaching practice, your development practice, your administration practice, whether you have a disability, either permanent or temporary. So have you got that broken arm so you don't have 2 hands now, so using a keyboard and a mouse might be more difficult? Or are you carrying your kid and therefore you're looking after that and you don't have 2 hands? Or have you got a permanent disability? There's so many different options, and there's different types of disability. So how does accessibility fit into your practice? I'd just like you to write that down yourself now, just as a note. Okay? So I want you to think about that as we go through this workshop. So online, web content is what we often build in Moodle. We're building using the text editor, and we're building HTML, for those who know what it technically is, adding in media and other bits and pieces. So what's the important aspects of this that you're going to have to take into account? So the Atto editor has a number of different features available to try and make it better. And as was mentioned earlier in Sanders' 3.9 session, we submitted back some of the improvements that we have in our version of Atto back into Moodle Core, which we're very delighted to do. So it has an accessibility checker, which checks 7 very common issues. It has a screen reader checker, and it has prompts when adding media, like now, when you add an image, instead of before where it's saying description not necessary as a tick box, it's asking you more, is this image decorative? And that's key. It's about thinking about what you're doing. And then you got prompts when you're adding tables, and then also feature-rich equation editors using MathJax. And these are key things. So the editor is really important. It's really important because it is your gateway to creating content. But it's not the only important thing. All of the other things you can think about yourself.
So we have, when you're thinking about text, what you need to consider is that you have enough color contrast, especially when the text is smaller in font, that you avoid using color to assign meaning to a message or some information, that you also include better, that you have consistent naming for, this is the predictability of a user's experience through the text as well, that you're sure to use the lists, that these are a great help to people that have to use assistive technology, because they help to frame and group information, and that you use the right HTML tags. So for instance, that you're using strong instead of bold, and that you're using emphasis instead of italic for these. The difference in using these tags means that screen readers and other assistive technologies can give a better meaning to the text to give them to the user.
Yeah, and that's key. It is about the semantic understanding, because you might bold it, and that's a visual thing. But if you want to put the stronger emphasis on the actual word, that's where strong comes in. And so there are two of the fixes that we also provided back into Atto, because up to 3.8, it was still using bold and I, because they were the standard from the browser. So with links, and we'll show you later some funky stuff with links, it's really important to have a descriptive link. How many times do you find click here, or seeing a URL as www.bbc.com or whatever it might be as the actual text for the link? And I've given you a hint there about one of the reasons why having a URL there is bad. Because if you're a screen reader, and for example, if you were to be reading the URL at the top of this presentation there, it would be, if you had HTTP in front of me, so the link, http://ms/7EU7YEUT. So if you have a really long URL, and you know the way sometimes Moodle URLs are really long, yeah, you don't want that being read at. So you want to, the text should be the target about where it's going to, not the fact it's the URL. And the other aspect is about new windows. So we've all in the past probably been using a new window for any link that's going outside of your Moodle site. Now, why that might seem logical to some, and I must admit at one stage it seemed logical to me, and I was wrong. The main thing here is without telling somebody. So on things like WordPress and Drupal, often you have a little icon showing that it's opening a new window, and they add into the hidden HTML there to say that it's a new window. But within Moodle, there's no such thing, although we've added that in our system. It is something about handling, not confusing people. So on a mobile phone, if you get open a new window, it doesn't handle tabs as well as a desktop browser does. Now, a screen reader is the same. They can't go back. If they've been opened into a new window, they can't click back. So you need to tell them that they're opening a new window. Or as we do, give people an option whether they want to open a new window or not. So these are really important things to consider. And this isn't about the editor. It's about the edit. It's not about the Atto editor. It's about the human editor.
And then you have situations where you need to use your headings correctly. So often you might have a long section of text, and if you don't have headings, you're creating a problem for people to understand just the summary, the overview of that content, and where the subsections might be. So it actually benefits everybody to have proper headings in place. But especially for people using assistive technology, it gives them the headings in advance so that they don't have to be screening all of the content to understand where the different aspects of the content are. So it gives you structure, it gives you context, and also you have to bear in mind that you want to follow the hierarchy of the headings in order. So Moodle, for instance, will always give you the page title, that will be heading 1, and then the subtitle will be heading 2. So when you get to the editor content that you're creating yourself, it starts at header 3, and the Atto editor gives you large, medium, and small headings to keep that order correctly.
Yeah, and that's really, really key. You know, otherwise you can confuse people using that technology. And people often say, but Gavin, the style of them isn't great, you know? And yeah, maybe it's not. So you can fix that with CSS in your theme. So you don't have to try and make a particular heading really big and bright pink or green or yellow, whatever one you want. You actually have to think about that in your theme design. And so clients that we worked with years ago actually really spent a lot of time to make sure their headings were good and accessible. Because it is cool to have them look nice, but they also have to be correctly usable by everybody. So images, watched a great presentation there recently about images and about how you go about thinking about what your alt text should be for really complicated images. Let's keep it simple at the moment. So one, an image, if it isn't decorative, So if it's not like cute little star or an arrow or something that has no meaning or context on the page, then it doesn't need an out description. It should be empty because it is decorative only. But if it does have meaning, if it's part of the content, if it is a photograph of something that you want to refer to in your text, give it a description. One of the other changes we did was make the description and the alt text space when you're adding an image, instead of one text box, it's a text area. You can add up to 125 characters. And that's important because it also indicates to you that you're supposed to make something, yes, it's supposed to be succinct, but it's supposed to be sufficiently detailed. And it is important that if you've got lots of text on images, and people often do, like in banners and that kind of thing, repeat it in the alt text. And complex images might need really complicated descriptions, and you might have to do that in an actual description for the image beyond the alt text. And what about color? Often people have lovely green and red for good and bad or whatever it might be. And these are things that aren't great. And if people are colorblind, and don't forget, 1 in 10 men are colorblind, 1 in 20 women. And so 1 in 10 men, if this conference has 1,500 people, which I saw Diego tweet about earlier, that's 150 people watching this conference are colorblind. Think about that for a moment. And then pixelation. You want to have decent quality images so that they're easy to read for everyone and they aren't straining people's eyes. It was interesting watching some presentations over the last few weeks, and the quality of the image is often very hard to read if you have text on it. So, and I'm able to read normally, as in like I have, except I now need reading glasses, but at a distance onto a screen it was fine. And also no flashing. You don't want to be causing people stress, and there are certain people who have challenges that require them not to be looking at flashing screens. So whether it be medical or neurodiversity or whatever it might be. So you need to consider all people when you're creating content.
So with the multimedia, which is a very popular choice when you're adding content, you need to make sure that you're using an accessible media player. So Moodle already has a very, very good accessible media player built in. It has customizations. You can have the controls on it. You can, it will play in different devices, so it's mobile friendly as well. And then, so when you're adding your multimedia, you need to ensure that you're adding the right information, such as closed captions or subtitles, so that somebody who's going to access this multimedia is able to use it to the greatest extent that they can. So if they're deaf, that they're able to use the closed captions, or if they're, so there's lots of different scenarios where people might be using closed captions. For instance, if the video isn't in their first language, if it's in English and and English is not their first language, that they can follow along, making sure that they're understanding the information correctly, and then that you can add things like text transcripts. So if somebody is having to watch the video in a noisy environment, such as on a factory floor or in public transport when they're traveling, that they're able to access in an alternative format that is easier for their scenario.
Yeah, and I think this is really key, and that's why we're using it here. And I noticed that one of the people in the room has joined in Catalan. I'm not sure what the quality is like there, David, but I hope it's okay. It certainly helps for everybody. And I know this is an international conference, so hopefully the captions or transcript is helping. One of the other things I like about that transcript engine is it tells you when it has changed slide. So tables. Now, it's really important. Just stop using, please, stop using tables for layout. Okay? Don't. I know you want to make your page look amazing. Learn divs. Learn how to use containers and stuff if you want to do layout. If you don't, just let the web page be the web page. There's nothing wrong with text. There's nothing wrong with long pages, Twitter is infinitely long, as are other web pages, for want of a better word. So it should be tabular data only. And you should make sure there's a caption, use headings. You know, again, people like going, oh, but I want it to be styled the way I want to. Styling is a theme issue, okay? It's not a teacher issue. It shouldn't be a teacher issue. We're not web designers. We're teachers. We're trainers. And then no merge cells. Now, some people call this a myth. It isn't really that it's a myth. It's that sometimes you can use merge cells well, okay? But most people don't, in my experience. In fact, I've only once seen merge cells being used in the correct way, which works sensibly with a screen reader. So avoid them, okay? And the same with nested tables. This is just something which just makes it more difficult for people, for everybody, to be able to understand what you're doing, okay? And with screen readers, it does make it much more difficult. So please, this is just about improving content for everyone. And if you go, oh, wow, you know, my table is really complicated. I want to do really cool things. Make 2 or 3 tables. What's wrong with that? You know, it doesn't have to be one table necessarily. It could be multiple. So think for everybody.
And in actual fact, the auto editor already tries to prevent you doing this because it's the more accessible way of creating content. So it's trying to avoid you making these mistakes to begin with. So it doesn't allow you to nest a table within a table, because tables should be singular for one purpose, really succinct, and create multiple ones if you need to.
Yeah, but if you're using another editor, please, all those options there don't have to be used.
So for the equations, which can be very, very problematic if somebody just creates an image of an equation. This is like the shortcut way of putting your content there. The problem with an image is, even if you try to put an alt description of an equation in, the equation itself can be so complex that you literally run out of space to describe it. Whereas if you use an accessible equation display, such as the Atto equations, or which uses Math.jx, it has lots of features. It's accurate, precise, fully accessible, because what it does is it creates a readable string of the equation exactly the way the person would expect it to be read out to them by a person, for instance. So then you have other, make sure that you just use one that's based on something like Math.jx, and also Whereas uses math type is the other fully accessible way of dealing with equations. Because if you have an equation, it's obviously completely relevant to the understanding and the content that somebody needs to draw from it. So it really should be accessible. Yeah,
and Whereas, which I understand, or Wyrus, sorry, are one of the sponsors of the conference. So hi, Ramon on the team.
They do a brilliant job.
They do a brilliant job. And one of the things I love about their system is the handwriting interpretation. Admittedly, it doesn't work for me, but I could barely read my handwriting. So the fact that their tool it could even be read by writing. So, but it's an awesome system. But Moodle has that strong base level functionality there that you should consider. So now you're going to be doing something else, but you're not going to be thinking and reflecting this time. I want you to go to your own Moodle site, and for the next few minutes, and we're going to keep quiet for 3 or 4 minutes here while you go and do this. We want you to go and look at your Moodle site. We want you to open up 1 or 2 pages, books, labels, and just look at your content and reflect on what we have been sharing so far. The text tips, the image tips, the links. Do you have links in there that have click here, download here, go there, which are meaningless unless you read everything around them? Do you have links there which show the URL and really should be the website name? Do you have images there without alt descriptions? I remember we analyzed some courses for an organization there last year, and all of their images had text, description not necessary. In fact, every one of them was part of the content. So some people, because they didn't understand what that meant, and that's why we changed it in 3.9, we contributed in the change to change it to being that this image is decorative only. So the people more understand. It's about using sort of psychology and nudging.
For instance, some of them were on a course main page, that they had a block on the side with the with the profiles of the different teachers that were actually teaching the course. And so some of these had been ticked. They had all been ticked off, no description necessary, because it wasn't in their mindset. It was like, well, it's so self-evident what these are, but without the description, it would be meaningless for somebody who can't see the image. So it has to be image of the name of the professor, to make it more accessible.
Yeah. So anyway, what I'd like to do is spend the next 2 to 3 minutes, okay? And we're going to keep quiet. I'm going to mute the microphone, so there'll be no more transcript happening. And I'd like you to find a few things and make a note of improvements that you're going to make to your content through the editor over the next week, hopefully. Maybe even today. I should have had some nice elevator music here. So I'm sorry, I could sing, but they'd probably disconnect me. So, welcome back. Just let's check and see what people have been doing with regard to the forums questions. Have anyone been commented anything in it? Yeah. No. Anything there?
We do have some interesting comments, no direct questions. So if you'd like, we can address a couple of them as we go or towards the end.
Let's do some now while we're doing this, okay?
Yeah, great. So we had a lovely little piece of feedback in regards to accessibility and how sometimes it can be something as situational as it being difficult to use a keyboard and a mouse with a cat on your lap. So just one to make everyone chuckle.
Cat video.
Yes, it can always relate to a good cat video. A lot of people mentioning that they appreciate you going beyond the detail of the usual get your fonts, colours and images right. And a couple of people also asking if you're able to share this presentation beyond the Moot as well.
Oh, well, we will be. And yeah, we're going to be sharing all that. That's not a problem. We just want to, this is a workshop, and I would suggest that you take this and do it as a workshop with your teachers. It's really important to be able to practice. And that's why we're trying to give space here. And I know it might be a little bit weird if you're watching on YouTube and having to go off and do it yourself. We were watching Sanders 3.9 presentation earlier on our TV. So not everyone goes to a conference in their sitting room. So any other things? I'm just noticing there. So here we go.
Yes, and you emphasise the importance of getting tables right. Can you please explain for those who may not know how screen readers read tables?
Okay, well, it's probably better if I'll address that afterwards, but it's just the fact that without headings, people can't navigate by column or by row, and that's one of the key things. You really do want to make sure you use headings for that. And then if you end up with things like merged cells, people can lose where they are within it. So, but there's some really good demonstrations online on some of the screen readers, and rather than take you through all of the niceties, I think it'd be better, I'll share a link later about that.
But in essence, when you get to a cell, you have to understand the relevance of its information in relation to the column it's in and the row it's in. So that's why the headers give it the navigation points that you're in. Yeah.
So like if you had a sales going across the top, the different years and the different products on the left, 7 then is apples in 2019. Although if you only sold 7 apples in 2019, you might not be in business. Anyway, let's move along then. We'll come back to more of the questions after. So thank you for that. So now we're going to have some real fun. Now, we all pretend this is not the case, but loads of LMSs and Moodle sites, like the same, have lots of documents in there. And often they're PDF exports from Word and PowerPoint. And that's just the way it is. But one of the things I would say is stop using PDFs. PDF should be the file type of least usage. That'd be my opinion. One, it's a little bit harder to use or to create really accessible PDFs. But Word documents and PowerPoint can be really accessible. So if you look at Apple, Google, and Microsoft with regard to Office documents, now they all have some really strong accessibility aspects, but I gotta say, over the last year, as you're seeing with PowerPoint Live, Microsoft are years ahead, truly years ahead. And I'm not being paid to say that, although Microsoft, if you want to send me some money, go for it. So accessibility inside of Office, I'm just going to take you through a few slides here. We're going to turn off the video just for a few minutes while we're doing this. Okay, so Microsoft sort of views things in this way, that you have these different challenges that people will have, sort of like disabilities. You might have vision, where people need a larger screen, or hearing, for those who are hard of hearing, or as one of our colleagues, who is tinnitus and turns on subtitles because they don't want that suddenly loud bang to cause them a problem. Neurodiversity, obviously, that's another really important area that we're all becoming more aware of over time. People who have learning disabilities, mobility challenges, including a cat, and then mental health. So all of these are areas which you need to consider and make sure. And that's why it is about for everybody. And if you start looking at Office, there is a lot of support there. And within the operating system, one of the comments in the forum mentioned it. I have a different picture, which I haven't shown in here, but I might use at the very end, of there's actually layers of accessibility when you're using an LMS, starting with the actual device that they're using. And so like then the operating system, and then the actual, whether you're using a browser or an app and so on. And so Microsoft provides accessibility supports at all of these layers, whether it's a screen reader, whether it's their learning tools, whether it's the accessibility checker, which I'll show you in a moment, and then whether it's training, and there's loads of really good videos and stuff around that. And then one of the key things is also templates. So people go, hey, where do I start? You start here, literally. Oops. So this is, every time I look at this slide, I think I've come out of presenting, but I haven't. So over here on the right-hand side, you'll see accessibility. And along the top left, you'll see where I'm doing a review, it's spelling, and then next one that's there is check accessibility. In the latest versions of Microsoft, and including 365, which I'm using here, they have an accessibility checker that is comprehensive. So over here on the right, early on when I transferred my presentation out of Google into Microsoft, it has various images at the top part here about inspection results. And there's also some slides which had just an image, which didn't have a title. So people would be able to navigate them as well. So you can add, as in this case here, accessibility inside Office. It's a hidden heading, but it's still a heading and registered as a heading on the page. So someone navigating the screen reader will still be able to know that's the heading for this image. Niceties like that you would not be aware of. And then down here, there's some warning about reading order, that when they're tabbing through and navigating through content on a particular slide, that it's done well. And then here over, you can see that in this example, I have that header selected, and it's like slide title 17, and that drop down, which I wasn't able to screenshot easily, is showing that actually I can either add a hidden heading, or in this case, use this heading or this text as a heading for the slide. And I think that's really key. It supports you. It really does help you get through this. Here's another piece, and that's that layer cake I was talking about. We were doing this from a webinar a month ago. And it's saying that this image is missing alt text. So over here, a layer cake of accessibility layers. And that's those layers I talked about: device, browser, application framework, so like the Moodle architecture, then the theme, then the site configuration, how they do the categories and that sort of stuff, how to do course navigation. And some people use some really, I'll just say, interesting course formats, which people well know what ones I don't like. And then you have the teacher content and student content, which is why the editor being better is so important. But one of the other things, then you've got these, you've got what's called an immersive reader, which is absolutely awesome for people who want to be able to focus. It's like going into reader mode on your iOS device, where it just reduces clutter instantly. So here, it also can change the page color. You can do a line focus like this, show one line at a time. It can improve the spacing. It can, as it has here, complementing. It's broken it out into syllables, and it can also read aloud to you. So it has tools built into their systems, which if you choose to share a PDF rather than a Word document, you are denying them access to some of these tools. And who would deliberately do that? It is so. That's what this is about. This is about an informative session to get you to think and understand what's available to you as a creator and also as a consumer. And there are those options along the top there that you can see. So immersive reader, really good, love it. But also, what if you absolutely have to save it as a PDF because you wanted print quality? Well, that's wonderful. Then make sure you click and have the correct options set within Word, that you can come in here and you can have document structure tags for accessibility set, or PDFA combined, whichever you're looking for, okay? And also create bookmarks. You can choose to create bookmarks from the heading, which gives them a better way of navigating the PDF. These are so important to do, and people don't do them. They just often print as PDF, and then it's unusable. It's basically an image. So, sorry if I'm being very emotive here, but you can't see me, but I'm throwing my hands around in the air. But you really got to understand that you are there. It isn't about protecting your content. It's about letting them use your content, letting them consume it. Sorry. So there's also that training stuff there. Great. You go, well, how do I create a proper PowerPoint that's accessible? 5 lessons there for you. 7 lessons for creating accessible Word documents. 3 for doing emails. You'd be surprised or not at how many people do inaccessible emails. And it's just, like sometimes you just get an image dumped in there that's so big you can't read anything. So now this is back to you again, okay? What we'd like you to do is, if you use Word, most people do have Word installed. I know some use Google Slides and Pages and so on, but whatever it is, whether it's Word or PowerPoint, go in and have a look and find their accessibility tools on your desktop. Go in and see, do you have that latest version? And if you don't, why don't you have the latest version? If your school or university or organization hasn't upgraded Word, it's not just a technical thing. It's now an accessibility thing. It's a legal thing. It's a moral thing. So if you're not using the latest tech, like with Moodle, if you're not using the latest tech, you're not giving the best experience to either your staff or your learners. So I want to keep quiet again for a few minutes, and then we'll come back to you. So here we go. Sorry, someone just asked there, where do you have to answer? So you can be using the forum in the forum discussion in the education room, which if you want to add your thoughts in there around this, please do. Or you can just tweet with the hashtag or just message us afterwards, or if you're in the BBB room, you can sort of answer there. But the main thing is to answer to yourself. If you're not using the latest version, you need to talk to your IT department. You need to talk to the inclusion officers. These are things which are causing problems that you're unaware of. And yes, don't worry, a few people keep asking, will we share the accessibility? Absolutely no problem. Or, sorry, share the accessibility presentation. There you go. Hey, I need a large drink, preferably a coffee, but a vodka would suffice. So, yes, we'll be sharing the slides somewhere. Okay, just looking at some of these questions again. If you, Kate, if you want to select some that we comments, perhaps.
Yes, we have a couple from Sue asking to explain again how tabs in Windows are interpreted. I'm not sure if that makes sense with that context.
Okay, it's just that if you open a new, so I'm assuming it's about new windows. So if you have multiple windows on your mobile phone, navigating between them isn't great. And we all know that, like, we might be going through a website, click on a link, and suddenly we've navigated off. So we have to go to our tab manager piece and then go back to the one that we were in. So if it's confusing for everybody, it's definitely going to be confusing for technology. And the technology, they can't click back if there's no back, and new windows have no back to the previous window. So it's about telling people. And so, for example, in our platform, we actually give people a choice of whether they want to open a new window or not with a link. So.
Okay, and that's followed up with a question, would you recommend maybe a locked/password protected Word doc rather than a PDF?
Well, once they open it, once you give them the password, they can still read it anyway. And if people are thinking about, well, I'm putting it as a PDF to protect it, you know, worst case scenario, they can print it and use OCR to get the text out of it. Do you really want to make your students work that hard to actually use your content the way they want to use it? So I would suggest that these are issues from the past, from a misunderstanding of how we want to use content. You know, we enforce greater restrictions online in digital media than people do when they were reading a paper book. And I find it surprising. I find it shocking, and it's terrible, but it happens, and I understand why. But we really have to let go. We have to let go.
Additionally, do you know anything about accessibility of LibreOffice documents? I hope I pronounced that right.
Yeah, LibreOffice. You know, I can also say that we haven't gone near it. It'd be really interesting to compare it now with MS Office, Libre, Pages, and Google. I'm going to talk about Google in a moment. I imagine it's less. Microsoft have invested hugely in accessibility, hugely, mainly because of the laws all around the world. And we've got this EU directive coming up later in the year. So one last one, and then we'll move on.
Okay. Let me see. You mentioned heading hierarchy in Moodle. Are you able to expand a little bit on that? For example, what heading level are section headings, block headings, etc. from Leslie? Well,
if you aren't sure what they are, you can use your browser inspect, and it will then tell you which they are. But in general, if you're looking at a page of content in a Moodle course, the Moodle course name is heading 1. The page name is heading 2, which is why ASO starts you off at heading 3 with large, medium, and small for 3, 4, and 5. So it's just about not manually going in and overriding that protection, okay? It's about not thinking that you know better than the browser. And some people do. I mean, I've come across some people who literally just ignore it and do it their own way because that's the way they want to do it. And that's just not an accessible and sustainable way of creating content. Anyway, let's continue. So G Suite, Google. So they haven't got any of the type of stuff that Microsoft have really, but they do have some information in there about how people can use Google Docs and all the accessibility supports they do. So explaining about screen readers and so on. And they also then have information about and some tips to make your presentation more accessible. They have no inbuilt accessibility check in the same way. Although I do believe there's a lovely Canadian company that has a commercial service around that for Google and for G Suite. And then you also have accessibility settings. So for screen reader or high contrast colors, and as Karen was mentioning. But you've also then within this, you've got the ability to turn on screen reader support within a PowerPoint or within a Google Slides document, and screen magnification, which is important as well. Okay, so there's those sort of things. So we're just going to do a very quick demo of some stuff that we've been doing recently. But before we do that, has anyone got any sort of other questions, or does anyone want to share? Any of the people who are in the session, perhaps in Big Blue Button, want to share their thoughts around the challenges for accessibility? No, pop-ups. So it's actually, I'm just going to grab this one question. Someone asked a question about if opening windows is a problem, does the same apply to pop-ups? Well, pop-ups generally, if when they're done correctly, announce to the screen reader that they are a pop-up, and so they are still understanding what's going on. So pop-ups aren't always an issue, but sometimes they are. And I've seen pop-ups that are done badly that are hard to use for everyone. So, okay. Any?
No other questions we can see as of yet, but we'll try and bring some through as they do come in.
What about anybody in the room? Do any of you want to share audio-wise? Yeah, so David Pignol is mentioning he uses Bootstrap in classes, navigation tabs, accordion, carousel, and so on. My understanding that a lot of those are fine, David. It's very easy to test. Very easy to test. But carousels can be done badly as well. It's all about whether they announce they're using the correct ARIA informational aspects there. Seeing back here, some people commenting on the use of PowerPoint Live and the subtitles, that it makes it easier to understand me. Yeah, I'm sorry if my accent is bad, by the way. I try, as other people say, I'm trying, but and unfortunately, you can't really translate jokes well. Is there anybody else adding in anything there?
Yes, Terry's asked, what tools do you use to check the accessibility of your content in situ? Tools like Wave?
Okay, well, I'm about to show you what we use, because it's what we do. Someone said, are tiles course formats, is that difficult? Well, I must admit, I would never recommend using a visual navigation in a course, which is what tiles is. I would never recommend it. Full stop. Sorry, whoever built tiles. It's visually really pretty, but I would never recommend that. You know, I see the course page, and I remember Michelle Moore talking about this years ago. It's the equivalent of the index in the book. It's a launch page to all of the different activities. And so the way I always look at it is that when you think about your phone, like Android and Apple and so on, these smartphones, they use icons to navigate into something. So having the nice dashboard, which has some images to navigate there, is great. However, the dashboard still has a list view. And so, because there are people who prefer it that way. But within a course, it should be more of a list view. It's an index. And it might not look as pretty as you want it, but you know what? If it's more usable, isn't that the only important thing? Really? Okay, let me just start off here then, before anybody else. Okay, so I'm going to start off with, So here we have a site that's set up, and I'll just do that, make it a bit easier. So Brickfield Education Labs, we've built an accessibility toolkit for Moodle. So it does exactly what somebody asked. In this case, we're looking at a course here. A teacher can see that they have some errors with images, layout, links, text. And they're going, well, what about images or links? What should I be doing? And if they don't know, and not every teacher's had their LMS training, their Moodle training. They certainly probably won't have had their accessibility training either. But if they want to click on that link, and it will then download a document like this, which gives them some tips on all of the various bits and pieces. So this is about using a concept called performance support, providing work aids to people so that they can understand what's going on. Okay, let's go back into here. But also we then have this, which will help them highlight and see where they're doing things that are wrong. Okay, And this just gives them a sort of an overview on where things are. Now, I'm logged in as an admin at the moment, so I'm going to have an admin view of this. We've also got a set of tools, so we can go in and have a look at the activities in that course. And again, this is what people need to understand. And there are a few competing products that's out there. Ally and Yuya would be two of them. And people be aware of. We're going to be announcing exactly this publicly, what we're doing this week. So here, 2 pages have passed and 6 have failed. And pages have lots of HTML content. So surprise, surprise, there's more problems than pages. But we've also got error totals where we can see here, actually, of all of the errors, 8 of the errors are on pages. Course, and that's the summary or the section summaries. And there's problems there, labels, and then books. So they're clearly issues as well. But we can also then, we group all of our checks into image, layout, link, media table, and text, because there's a lot of technical stuff into that, and you don't need to know that, not immediately. But you can see here that 7 of the errors, so more than half, are related to links. Now, I've done that deliberately, so you'll see in a moment. We also provide a category breakdown, so if you're a college, you can see your School of Botany or your School of Culture, otherwise known as the Student Union usually, and then some random categories. And it gives you a breakdown of how many problems you have, or also the percentage. Or you could have a complete course breakdown and so on. But one of the things there I was showing was the printable. So we have a view here, and imagine this as being a transcript for your course, basically. So we then have that they can download a PDF, which is, if they want to print it, which will give them basically their typical errors, the top errors that they're making, activity pass rates for all of their different activities in their courses, so they can understand where their pain points are. Because if you're not informed, if you don't find where your issues are, you can't help focus your fixing, can you? So that's what's really important from this. But if we go back and have a look actually at the fixing, so yes, it's good to have a list of all the errors, and you can see here someone's using target_blank, which is opening in a new window. Links should not open in a new window without warning. So that's very bold, but we provide a link directly for them to fix it. But speaking about bold, and in this case, we have no issues with bold in this course. And we have no issues with italics, but we did see that there was issues with links. So our system goes off and has in the background created a database of page names with the URL. So where before it was bbc.com linking to bbc.com, it can now be directly updated within your course, and you can do this site-wide for all the various things. So the links now are actually talking about the destination. And this is really key to be able to understand the whole approach to how you're going about managing things. Just hold on. And all of this is sort of managed within an accessibility area. We put accessibility in between teaching and technology, which is sort of where we think it sits in the world. But if we go in here now, you can see bold, and we've got lots of just OER courses that we imported here. And it's going, hey, well, we're going to change screencast to screencast with strong. Or in the case of italics, the same thing, I over to M. And so these are the kind of things which are really important. And this is our find and fix. And the other aspect of what we're doing, and again, just as literally somebody asked, so I thought that was fun. Let's go back out to our digital literacy. So I'm going to show you something down here. See this text here. One of the most favorite tools that you've got in Moodle is, or one of the favorite filters, is one that automatically turns links or a URL into a link. Okay, so oops, didn't turn anything on. Let's try that again. There we go. I'm really glad that the button is back, and we're showing in 3.5 because we support 3.5 forwards in what we're doing. So here, it's just the actual URLs are just put in here. So the filter is changing them. And if we want to go back, let's see, or just submit, come back to the course. You can see here that using our engine in the background, because we have a harvesting database of names, it's now showing the name rather than the URL as the link automatically. Also, automatically turning a link into an embedded image with no alt text is bad, so we've actually removed that because that's a bad practice. So there's things like that which are really handy, which aren't good. So we're looking at ways of fixing those kind of things. But that's but that's just one of them. We also have that when you add a link in. So, and obviously up here, these were some of those link texts. Anyway, I'll just come out of this again. Oops. There's various other bits and pieces that we have done in the same area, but I'm not going to go through them all. I just wanted to show some related to that sort of content that we're talking about. So any other questions come up since?
Yeah, we have one question from Sue. What way do you recommend including a link for an external video to open? For example, a pop-up if not another window or tab.
Well, if you're linking to an external video, either embedded in your page or just let it open in a new page. What's wrong with that? If they want to come back, they'll come back.
I believe that is the only one for now. What we'll perhaps do is just advise watchers and listeners that, again, if you could head to the forums if you have any other questions, and no doubt Gavin and Karen will be able to answer those in due course. Yeah, was there anything you'd like to add, Gavin or Karen?
Well, hold on a sec. Just let's add back in there. I was just seeing there's one question there, by the way. Is it the same for collapsed course format? So, as Martin told me a few years ago, collapsing topics, there is our collapsed format. It has to be done correctly. Okay, there can be accessibility issues, so you need to test it. And the one thing you have to do is test what you've got. Test your themes, test the language you're using, the structure of your courses, and all the content. There's a lot to do in there. And that's why we're sort of trying to focus on teachers. It's really about making sure what you do is as best as you can, and then encouraging your institution to fix the systems.
Yeah, and just raising the awareness and just making just showing how things can become obstacles if they're not being like, for instance, with the collapsed topics, if they're not being handled the right way. It's just about raising awareness. Yeah,
but I haven't tested collapsed topics or tiles from an accessibility point of view. I like the concept of collapsing topics, which is why I know that Moodle Workplace has it as well for its Moodle Workplace team. All of these things just need to be tested for accessibility, and then let the developer know if there's an issue, and I'm sure they'll fix it. So, it's just personally, I think that courses shouldn't have a visual navigation to everything. I think it removes the aspects that people would like to be able to read through and scan through a page. So,
but I'd just like to say thank you very much to everyone for their questions and your comments, and it's been a really, really engaging and it's been a really, really good presentation.
It's been great to get the feedback from people, and stay safe in these challenging times, everybody.
Yeah, there's been some fantastically enthusiastic discussion in the forums, and we look forward to the share of the presentation. So on behalf of everyone who can see accessibility as being such a huge evolving challenge, we appreciate the time you've taken to take us through some of your recommendations. And yeah, next up we have a networking break, so I'd encourage everyone to join us in the networking cafe. Thank you so much, Gavin and Karen.
Thank you. Coffee time. Woohoo.
Coffee.